we don't really understand what the opportunities are going to be in terms of career choices in the future. That the jobs of the future have yet to be defined. And so it's important to not pigeonhole yourself at too young of an age. Our world is changing so fast. The technology is changing so fast. The jobs that are available are changing so fast. We have to be more agile to how we respond to the world. And being able to be a creative person is actually an incredible asset. It's actually an essential skill set for the 21st century.
This is Mark Wojcik, and I'm wondering, how's your so-called career? Welcome to So-Called, the podcast that explores the why and how of work. On this episode, we meet Karen Bubb, cultural planner for the City of Boise. But that's not all Karen does, not by a long shot.
I'm the co-founder and a board member of Searles Place, which is a cultural nonprofit that is an artist in residence program in Garden City. And I'm a trustee of the Alexa Rose Foundation, which provides grants to artists of all kinds to pursue their creative practice. And then I'm also a visual artist. I'm a painter primarily, but I also dabble in clay and ceramics, stained glass, other materials.
In addition to these roles, Karen also teaches at Boise State University. I asked Karen if there was a thread between her various activities. So you have many things going on, but you choose to engage in so many areas. Mm-hmm. And how do you decide whether you will engage?
What I love about this job and why I do all the different things that I do is because I really value the arts and history and culture as an integral part of our life in Boise and in urban places in general. And I'm passionate about creating opportunities for others and creating a city that I really want to live in. And I want to live in a place where there's really active cultural opportunities. There are things happening. There are people who are pursuing their creative practices in meaningful and challenging ways. And I want to be contributing to that, and I want to be a part of that. So that's really what drives my choices. Like, where can I make a contribution that is unique? Where can I bring people together where they might not come together otherwise? How can I do things that are really engaging? So I suppose my own curiosity drives some of that, and the willingness of my leadership, our leadership at the City of Boise, to have us engage in those things, and the value that they place on culture is also part of that. So I'm wanting to make the city a place where I as an adult person want to be, but also where our young people who are creative feel like they have opportunities and places that are interested in what they have to say.
Karen told me that her involvement in all these different activities strengthens her performance. Each builds upon the other. She cites her experience in co-founding the nonprofit Searles Place as one example.
So I think that my training as an artist actually really contributes to my performance as an arts administrator. So it's interesting that what I'm able to see is this multiplicity of things that I do. They all contribute to each other. So they make me stronger and more agile than I would be if I said, I'm going to be an administrator now, so I have to put my paints away and not think of that anymore.
Yeah.
Instead, I chose to do all these things, and I feel like it helps me to do them in a different way, in a better way than I would have otherwise. In founding a nonprofit organization, in founding Searles Place in Garden City, really trying to think about what do artists need. They need space and time and place to work. How can the local community interact with that artist? Workshops and events and opportunities, exhibitions. So thinking about how people would use that space, but also how does that space act as an incubator for the community to change and grow. I want Boise and the surrounding area to be the most creative place it can be. So if the people who are living here are asking themselves, what do I need to do to be more creative? And then they're getting resources to do that, and they're reinvesting in themselves and in this place, then that's just made my job as a cultural planner a little bit easier, because those individual artists are contributing to that, the foment of activity. So again, all these things end up kind of overlaying and crossing over each other.
I asked Karen what she finds satisfying about her work.
Well, I think working with community, the none of the jobs that I do alone. Even being an artist, I am alone in the studio, but then you have to come out and show in a gallery environment, or you share work with a larger population. So I think that recognizing that none of us are really isolated, and in all the different projects and programs that I work on, I work with several different communities, and I really like that aspect of it. I think when I was in art school as a young person, one of the things I didn't understand, and I really sought to understand by doing internships, was to try to understand, where does art fit in the world? And in New York, in a larger environment, art is often kind of shoveled off to the side, and it's in its own little dominion. In working in city government and culture, it's really about looking at, where does art and culture fit in the urban fabric? And then how do we work with all these different publics to identify what's authentic to our community and bring that out.
Are there things that you don't enjoy as much about the work, or that are more difficult to do?
Mm-hmm. You know, in stepping out of the public art job, I stepped out of doing a lot more contract management, and I'm not doing that anymore. And I have to say, I don't miss contract management. So that is something I'm happy to let go of.
Yeah.
I think in the cultural planning arena, it's a little bit more amorphous. So conversely, it's not so specific. Like, this project begins, you're in the middle, and then it's done. It's more broad. So there's not as much concrete definition in terms of what the agenda is. I mean, again, the blessing is I get to write my own job description and what I get to do, and then the question is, well, when do you know you've arrived or you've done it?
How do you go about doing that for yourself?
I wrote a list of, identified all the different projects I was working on in my job, in my volunteer work, in my personal life, and then I wrote each of those up as course descriptions, as if it was something that I was learning or something I was teaching. And that includes what the books are, who the audience is, what I'm going to have at the end of this project. How do I know that I'm done with that class? And that really helped me to scope the different projects and to have a more refined way of understanding it myself, and also communicating with my peers about what it is I do.
In a world where we're always teaching and learning, Karen's idea to use course descriptions was intriguing, so I asked her for a few examples.
Here's some of my course descriptions.
Yeah.
First Peoples, the intersection of social justice, environment, and cultural planning. Or regional collaboration, counties converge around culture. Or cultural policy, driving decisions in a bureaucratic environment. So those are some examples.
Yeah, I might need to take that class. Let me know how it goes.
I've had people ask me, can we really take these classes?
Yeah, I was just thinking that myself. So how did you come to find that direction, or what you wanted to do in terms of your work and career?
I think it happens incrementally. I don't think there wasn't a big light bulb that went off over my head. It's incrementally responding to the opportunities that I found, and looking for those opportunities. And then over time being conscious and purposeful about my own values and what was meaningful to me. So I think through that that allowed me to find my path.
Karen's path after high school began in college.
I got my undergraduate degree in art, and I grew. I went to University of Oregon, lived in Eugene, lived in New York City for about 8 years. So the world expanded, and then I was able to come back to Boise with this larger sense of the world and a skill set that I didn't have previous to that.
After her stints in Eugene and New York City, Karen returned to Boise and began working as the public arts manager for the City of Boise.
I was in my job for 10 years, actually, when I started to look at what were my peers who were in leadership positions and the types of job that I was in. What kind of degree did they get? What kind of training did they do? If I wanted to move on to another level, what would be the thing to look at? And that's when I decided to go back for my public administration master's. Again, it wasn't something I would have considered when I was a younger person, but although I came into it really thinking of myself as an artist, when I looked at what I felt my contributions are as a professional, it really was as a public administrator. And it was at that point that I decided to pursue my master's in public administration. And that helped me to re-engage with my job in a different way, in a deeper way, in an academic way that I had not engaged as an administrator before. So that, for me, periodically, like reassessing, do I need to do additional training? How can I engage with this differently? That, I think, following your curiosity will lead you places. It's led me places.
I asked Karen what gave her the confidence to pursue a career path that has a reputation for being a difficult way to make a living.
I think part of it actually was the blessing of being a middle-class kid whose family didn't have the money to support me after college. In college, my parents are divorced. My mom paid for a third of my college. My dad paid for the other third, and I had to pay for the third and support myself. And so that made me a really practical person. I have always worked. I have always supported myself. And knowing that I had to made me, although I was still a dreamer, it also made me very practical. And so part of that, trying to understand where art fits in the world, is trying to understand how can I get paid to do something that I love. And I have been blessed to find those opportunities and to avail myself of them and to continue to keep those opportunities. So I think as a young person, if I had either not had to work, I may not have found my way, in oddly, or if it had been too hard for me, if I didn't have the help that I did have from my parents or the support that I had emotionally from my family, I think it would have been harder for me to make those choices. But I think because my family believed in me and supported me emotionally and gave me the opportunities, in fact, there was an expectation that I would go to college and that I would succeed, that gave me the platform to succeed.
Does creativity have a bad rap?
I think culturally it does, and this is actually part of what I teach about, is that it has a conflicting rap. There are really positive and negative associations with creativity. On the one hand, people who are creative are flaky and difficult to control, and you don't want them in your office place. On the other side, people always are talking about, think outside the box, and what's the next innovation. Like, innovation is the sexy creativity. So we're being asked to be creative, but we're being dissed because we're creative. So I think that people get a mixed message about what does creativity really mean. And that's actually why I got interested in teaching about it and researching what does it truly mean to be creative. It's actually an essential skill set for the 21st century because our world is changing so fast. The technology is changing so fast. The jobs that are available are changing so fast. We have to be more agile to how we respond to the world. And being able to be a creative person is actually an incredible asset.
Do you have any advice for how people can tap into their creativity in the work they do, regardless of the work they do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people think creativity means the ability to draw or to choreograph a dance. Mm-hmm. So their perceptions is that creativity is specifically only linked in the arts. So I think part of it is really loosening up our understanding of what creativity is and understanding that, when you choose to cook with whatever's in your refrigerator and you don't have a recipe, in essence, and to some degree, you're being creative because you're putting together something that didn't exist before in a way that only you can do. So it really is, it's understanding that problem solving is creativity. So when we look at a difficult problem and try to break apart the pieces of it and put it together in a different way, that's creativity. So I think that there are books that you can read on what creativity is to think about it differently. But part of it is getting out of the mindset is that it's only exist in the arts. I think we don't really understand what the opportunities are going to be in terms of career choices in the future. That the jobs of the future have yet to be defined. And so it's important to not pigeonhole yourself at too young of an age in terms of what the type of person you think you are or the type of job you think you're going to have, to keep yourself open. Because that's another experience I have as a teacher, is that students come into my class at 18 years old and they've already identified I can't do that because I'm not that kind of person, or I don't have that skill set. And they kind of self-identify, and by doing that in a particular direction, but in doing that, they also close themselves off to things that they might learn or aptitudes they might have. So to really understand that they need to stay more open in terms of what they might do in the world.
With the many kinds of work Karen does, it is no surprise that she has had many influences over the years. Who influenced your thoughts and attitudes about work?
I think it's inevitable that we're influenced by our parents. Seeing my parents both work very hard and work regularly, and that definitely influenced my perceptions about work. Mm-hmm. They did things that were meaningful to them. I think that was also important. There was no one in my family that was in a creative field, so I didn't really see the options around me for that.
Karen worked as a nanny in New York City to pay her way through college. Mimi, the woman Karen worked for, became a positive influence on her career.
It created a lifelong relationship with this woman who I was a nanny for and her daughter, Rachel. So they became family to me. So I actually gained another support system through that. And meeting Mimi as a young person, I think she gave me a lot more opportunity, ideas. And also, I think, understanding feminism at a young age, understanding as a young woman going into the workplace, the gender politics and issues that I had been a little bit oblivious to before that, or a lot oblivious to.
After finishing college in Eugene, Karen returned to New York City to work for a husband and wife team who ran a nonprofit gallery.
Jeanette and Colo were the directors of that space, and they ran a gallery, Exit Art, that was very, a nonprofit, very pushing of the boundaries. So they focused on what they called hybrid culture. So it was multicultural, looking at gay and lesbian issues. They did exhibitions, performances, and I was part of a very small staff, and so I learned an incredible amount because Cola would come up with these crazy ideas for installations, and we would have to figure out how to do it, and we did.
Yeah.
And so I learned that I could be very competent, and I learned I could do things that I just couldn't question. I just had to figure it out.
Yeah.
So Jeanette and Colo and the people that I worked with, they were my colleagues that we worked together. They became lifelong friends. Yeah. In fact, I would say that the closest friends that I have are people who I've worked with.
Yeah.
Because you get to know people so well when you're you spend hours and hours with them, and you are in stressful times with them. They understand what's going on in your world. And I would say that continues to this day. The colleagues that I have at the City of Boise, both in the Department of Arts and History and elsewhere in the city, I learn so much from them about what work is by watching them. And I think I also grew to love public administration by watching the dedication of people who are in the city. There are people who are just so dedicated to environmental issues, to building, sustainable environments. I've learned a lot from my peers.
When it comes to careers, Karen advises that it's more than just following your passion.
I think it's also important, instead of necessarily just following your passion, it's understanding where the opportunities are. Mm-hmm. I feel like as a young person, I did love art, but I didn't. But the way I found my path was trying to understand what are the opportunities for art in our culture, in our community, and how can I respond to those opportunities, and both combine the passion that I had with the opportunity that was in the world. I never considered working in a municipal government. I never considered public art field or planning or public administration. They weren't things on my agenda. So, but by responding to where my skills, how my skills transferred into Boise when I returned, I was able to find that niche and really inhabit it by learning on the job over time.
Maintaining curiosity about your chosen field is also a key ingredient to success.
And what you're curious about, like what you find interesting, where you can have wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Those things I feel like are really important because you spend so many hours doing that thing. And if you don't have a sense of curiosity or wonder about what you're doing, then I don't think you'll stay that long in that field. A friend gave me advice as a young person that I've used, which is make yourself indispensable in whatever it is you're doing. And people will need you. They'll call you back. And I've had that experience. That's helped as well.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
To be confident in yourself, to not doubt yourself, to recognize that relationships, romantic relationships are really not as important as you think they are. Let it go. There's a lot more that's important than that. To not be afraid to seek opportunity, to interview people who you're interested in talking to or you're interested in what they're doing and try to understand, like you're doing, how they got to where they are. And to not wait for opportunity, to make your own opportunity. I think that there's a lot more opportunity out there than we recognize. And write thank you cards. I think having gratitude and being kind, recognizing that all the different people that you meet along the way, you never know when you're going to walk into a job interview and that's the person who's going to be interviewing you. Or a thank you note that you wrote to someone that you might need a letter of recommendation from that person at a later time. So really be thoughtful in terms of how you relate to people in the world. And I would also say the other thing that's helped me over the years is going to counseling, like to not be afraid to ask for help. Because I think that there's an increasing sense of loneliness, as you say, in the world, and isolation. So knowing that you can reach out to a professional therapist, to a counselor, to someone that you see as a mentor, to ask for help or ask for direction or ask when you get stuck. Because I definitely have had really critical moments in my life where I was very depressed and didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do, or I got stuck by something. Mm-hmm. And it was counselors, whether at school or elsewhere, that helped me to work through some of those issues and get past them. So I think I want to impart that it's not all easy, and you don't have to do it by yourself.
But is there a next big thing that you want to do or that you're working on now?
Well, I think the most compelling project I'm working on right now is when Boise had the 150-year anniversary, our sesquicentennial in 2013, we assessed kind of what have we celebrated, what have we memorialized, and what have we ignored. And a big hole in our civic environment is the recognition and acknowledgement that of the indigenous people of the Boise Valley. We have no public art, we have no interpretive signage, we have street names that reference the tribes, but we don't really explain them. And so one of the opportunities that I have in the cultural planning position is to really understand how might Boise connect with the indigenous populations, and both historically so that we understand their place in our city, but also in a contemporary way. The tribes were forcibly removed in 1863 onto reservations that are 3+ hours away. But those tribes are still thriving. Those cultures are still alive. So how do we connect with that contemporary population and engage them in what Boise is? Even though I'm from here, I didn't understand the history of the Native American population in Idaho or the United States, frankly. And so I've become obsessed about reading and understanding that history. And the more that I understand, the more strongly I feel that we need to acknowledge that history, and we need to make a contemporary alliance with tribes and bring them back into the city.
It turns out that Karen's work on indigenous populations has a surprise connection to her own family history.
And then in the last few months, again, just an odd irony, I found out that my 9th great-grandfathers are William Bradford and William Brewster of the Mayflower, that I'm a direct descendant of the two critical characters from the Mayflower.
How did you find out?
My great-aunt did our genealogy 30 years ago, and it was given to all of my aunts and uncles and to my father, but my father never shared it with us. Mm-hmm. And I actually went to Montana to my brother's son's high school graduation, and my sister Kelly happened to bring it, and she's like, "Oh, I thought you might be interested in this." She hadn't even really read it.
Yeah.
And she handed it to me, and I stayed up all night, like just totally diving into all this information. And I get up in the morning, I'm like, we're related. We're Mayflower. We're related to Bradford and Brewster of the Mayflower. And my siblings were like, "Yeah, so?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Wow.
And then in addition to that, our 4th great-grandfather was in the Civil War. He enrolled when he was 14, pretending to be 18. He survived the Civil War, and then he enrolled in the Indian Wars. He was in the cavalry and retired as a major brigadier general in 1907. And my uncle had acquired all of his military records, so I can actually go through and see what Civil War battles he was in and what he was involved with in the Indian Wars. And there are people who I'm working on this Native American project with who are the descendants of people that my grandfather fought and put on reservations. So it has become incredibly personal now to understand my personal family relationship to the history of America and understand my place in that history. It has sparked this other interest in me in trying to understand where I'm from and what those places are like and migration paths and then how to translate that into artwork. So that's what I'm working on in my studio right now, is artwork about this. But the other thing I'm experiencing too, as I'm 52, is that feeling that you have like different acts of your life, and I really still feel like I still have a big act ahead.
Yeah.
Like maybe everything I've done has just been preparing for this next act, and that whatever that is might be a departure or grow out of one of these things I'm currently working on. But there's something important left to come. We're not done yet.
Whether your career is your passion, a paycheck, or a pain, I hope today's episode has informed, inspired, and challenged your own relationship with work. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes of So Called. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Subscribe and leave us a review. So Called is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.